Hello, I'm Carol Greco, founder, owner, and CEO of WeCare4, which is a global, diverse community platform and portfolio of resources for all caregivers and other stakeholders interested in helping those who care for others. Our focus is on caregivers of the aging, and we also serve caregivers of adults and children with special needs. The catalyst for WeCare4 was my and my husband's parents. John and I were responsible for the care of both sets of our parents for over 25 years, including two with Alzheimer's, one with cancer, and another with heart disease, among all other health conditions and financial situations. It was quite a journey and learning experience, ranging from care in their homes, then in our home, and eventually care facilities. It was extremely challenging in spite of my prior experience as the founder and CEO of a very successful childcare and elder care consultancy and placement agency called Family Care Necessities. I founded WeCare4 to make sure that others did not need to go through what we went through in our caregiver journey, trying to find the right help, information, products, services, and resources that we needed amidst the many silos and disparate sources. As one of my business associates, who is also a prior family caregiver, recently said, when you realize that you don't know what you don't know, you go to WeCare4. It is the one-stop shop for everything you will need to know. Today, we'll be talking about insurance and related financial matters, which caregivers should be aware of before they get hit with the situation that we found ourselves in. Larry Singer will be joining me, and he is partner at NJL&amp. Larry, welcome.
Thank you, Carol. So I'm Larry Singer, and I'm an insurance agent, and I'm a partner in an independent insurance agency called NJL&amp, stands for New Jersey Life and Casualty Associates. We've been in business since 1948, and the business has been handed down from partner to partner over all of that period. We specialize in estate planning, the needs of older adults for insurance and advice, including retirement advice and Medicare advice about Medicare and related subjects. I came into the business because of the death of a brother-in-law who had very little insurance and was influenced by a remark that his daughter made at the funeral to me when she said, "What's going to happen to us, Uncle Larry?" I came home from that event and called my insurance agency and said, I would like to go into this business. That's how I started. So without further ado, why don't we get into this?
All right. My first question, Larry, is family and friend caregivers get thrust into situations where they must make decisions, including financial decisions for their loved ones. What advice would you give to families before they find themselves in these situations with an aging loved one who's beginning to need assistance? What do they need to have at hand to manage these situations?
Carol, every situation is different. The relationships between parents and children vary all across the board. But in an ideal world, at some point, a child needs to say to a parent, what do you want me to do if the worst happens? You have a lifetime of assets. I simply don't know where everything is. I don't know what you would like to have happen. I don't know what you would like for yourself. So, at some point, assuming the chemistry is there and assuming an environment where people can relax, are not interrupted, and can devote some energy to this, that's the question that needs to be asked. What do you want me to do if something happens? And beyond that, what's the status of your will? Do you have a will? Where is it located? Do you have power of attorney? Some people would say the most important thing is power of attorney, because we know many instances where the older generation simply can't make decisions, are unable to make decisions anymore, don't even really understand how to write checks. So the power of attorney maybe is the most important question to ask initially. Who has power of attorney in case something happens? And then what would you like to happen? What would you like us to do?
Those decisions, Larry, I found when it was great with my parents because my mother had a list of things that jewelry and some of her things that she wanted me to do, and she told me what to do. They gave me their will, they gave me and had a power of attorney, and it had the living will in it as well. So I knew what to do in the case of either one of my parents got very ill. John's parents, we realized that they didn't have a will. We had that drawn up. We had a power of attorney, but it wasn't a kind of conversation with either one of them. For me, it was easy because I was very close. For John, it was easy to talk to his parents, but I've heard from my friends, it was very difficult to get their parents to talk about those kinds of things. And I'm sure you've come across that as well.
With my parents, it was really quite easy. My wife's parents were quite easy. They did have some assets. They weren't rich, but they had enough assets that they needed some focus. And a number of times we would sit down at dinner with my parents or my wife's parents and the kids and say, just discuss it. What would you like me to do if something happens this minute? My parents went through all of their information, but we have clients where the trust simply isn't there, or the parent simply doesn't feel open enough with the children to even have the discussion. So it's every situation is different. In an ideal,
Exactly.
sit down and say, what would you like me to do? Where is everything? Do you have a list of all of the assets? Do you have a power of attorney? In an ideal world, that would happen, but of course, it doesn't always, and it leaves people in a very difficult situation.
Yep. And that's one of the things that I try to talk to family caregivers about is, in fact, I have a friend right now who doesn't have a copy of her parents' will, doesn't have a copy of power of attorney. In fact, the father in this case is in his mid-90s and her mother's in her 90s, and the power of attorney that she's aware of that her father told her about is in the mother's name, and the mother does not want to talk about it because she says she's going to take care of the father, and her mom's not with the
Yeah.
program anymore. So that's a difficult situation. And like you said, every situation is different. And I think the key thing is try to, before things get to a point where you can't, the reasoning begins to come into play. I mean, people get very defensive and try to get as much information as you can.
I don't know how many times, Carol, we've talked to people. It's got to be in the dozens and dozens where you talk to the older generation about putting their affairs in order, and they have a stroke suddenly. Maybe it's not a stroke, maybe it's a cancer diagnosis or something that puts them in the hospital for an extended period and hampers their judgment. I talk to a lot of older people who think they're still of sound mind, and they are, to the extent that they can live on their own and do things, but they get confused. They get confused easily, and sometimes those people can be taken advantage of. So it's a very complex time of life. Things are moving quickly as you get older, and when I say things are moving quickly, I mean the aging process seems to from month to month, there can be enormous differences that the child just may not totally understand. But we can't make people sit down and talk about things that they don't want to talk about. What we can do is urge people to put something in writing as to what they want to happen. We can urge people to have power of attorney, a healthcare power of attorney, an adorable power of attorney. And, you can't force people to do it. But at some point, something's going to happen.
Yeah, and it may all come apart. So one of the things that I know that we talk about I mean, I came to you and I said, Larry, I don't want the same things to happen with my kids. And you got some of the, I guess our next question is, you've got these same caregivers, presumably children of the elderly, and you have some professional caregivers who are working with the aging. How do they protect themselves as they age? What do they need to do to have a comfortable and secure end of life? I learned a lot just how to protect myself and to make sure that my kids know, here's a copy of the will, we have the power of attorney, we have the pulse form, what to do in the case of that we are incapable of handling the medical aspect of it. But there's also some things financially. And I know we talked about insurance. I know that I took care of some long-term insurance needs. Tell me a little bit about some of the things that when people come in and say, all right, I'm taking care of my parents, they're like in their late 60s, maybe in their 60s, and I know that I'm approaching that age. What are the kinds of things that you advise people to make sure that they're insured properly, and what they may be looking for in their parents' portfolio if their parents forget about it?
Look, people buy life insurance, disability insurance, when they're young to protect their family security. We call that family security insurance. Longer term, we know that whether it's saving for retirement or dealing with the risk management of the issues of aging, there's almost, well, unless you're, one of the the top of the 1%, there's never enough money. And the only way to deal with that is to do it relatively early in life, because once you get into your 60s, the costs of starting at that point are going to be very high. Chances are people are not going to do it. But if people adopt an approach of starting to think about this at earlier ages, that's when to do it. We look at long-term care insurance as portfolio protection. Long-term care insurance protects the well spouse, the financial security of the well spouse, and it protects the legacy of both spouses to their children and grandchildren. We have 6,000 years of human civilization, and these issues have never changed over that period of time. They change in some respects. It used to be that older people, it was just a given that the older people would be taken care of by the younger people. So, for a long time, that was just the way things were. Today, things are a little bit different. The problem's the same, but the solutions have to be different because we're spread out over larger distances. And families, the nuclear family isn't always, together all the time, as used to be the case. So we try to encourage people to start thinking about this early. There are some excellent insurance products that help. Today, for example, you can buy a life insurance policy, a permanent life insurance policy that has a long-term care rider. If you get it in your 30s, you can have it paid up by the time you're 65 without, a lot of financial effort. So you can go into retirement with this package of permanent life insurance and long-term care insurance and not have ongoing expenses. Of course, you could also pay it out over the term of your life, but by using these permanent products, you're building up cash value. So you have something there in case you need immediate cash, whether you borrow it or take it or surrender the policy. You have a death benefit and you have a benefit for long-term care insurance. So one way or another, you're going to use that policy to your benefit. There are annuity products that are very helpful to people. There are annuity products that I don't know how much we've talked about annuities. This may be a little bit off topic, but immediate annuities aren't sold on the basis of their interest rates. They're sold, the cash returns on an immediate annuity are based on life expectancy and to some extent interest rates. But life expectancy is the dominant factor in an immediate annuity. And for those people who are in their 70s and older, the cash on cash returns on an immediate annuity will be, in today's rates, they're going to be in the mid 7s to mid 8% range, depending exactly upon age. So that's one way to turbocharge a portion of the money that somebody has in order to pay the costs of living as they get older.
One of the things that I found with my parents, my father had a small annuity, but I mean, it just was, I mean, it wasn't that much. But what I also want to stress to the audience is that what I realized when my father had planned for my mom was that no one expected to live into their 90s. This is the generation that this is the greatest generation, the people who were married in the 40s, early 50s. Now they're in their, mid to late 90s. And I don't think my father planned on that. And, because their parents didn't live that long, but hopefully the family caregivers who are now becoming aware of these things, they can, talk to their parents about annuities. They can talk to their parents about, hey, look, and caregivers of their parents who have children who are in their 20s and are thinking about getting married and start planning now. You said get the insurance products that they need, the proper insurance products. A lot of those products were not available back then, but I think people began to realize life expectancy has increased with all the wonderful medications that we have. But it's also something that, people, I know that my parents, John's parents, there was not that kind of financial planning. They didn't do it. And hopefully some of the people that are listening to this could learn from that and start to think about those things. And maybe, like you said, if they're in their 60s, 70s, it may be too late, but they can share that knowledge with their children and other family members.
Well,
Before we leave this topic, Larry, you're going to say something? Sorry.
go ahead, Carol.
I wanted to ask you about adults and children with special needs. Also something that I know a lot of the lawyers, there's a lot of trusts that are built for these children. You even see it on a television commercial where one of the women whose son was very severely injured in an accident, and it's part of war in Afghanistan. And she said, my biggest thought was, what would happen to my son, when we leave? I mean, and the same thing if you have a child with special needs and they're adults with special needs and their parents are there products that are available that you can talk to caregivers and family members and mothers and fathers of children with special needs?
Sure, Carol. The insurance products are ideal for those families. There are two ways of thinking about it, those children. One way is to have a certain amount of insurance that ensures that the child will have access to benefits to supplement the lifestyle that they have based on their access to public benefits like housing and Medicaid, things like that. If the money goes directly to the child, the child might lose those benefits when they come into that money. So, there are special needs trusts that deal specifically with that sort of situation where you want to make sure you preserve the child's access to public benefits. Second way to think about it, and it's not that we don't see it that often because it involves, a real investment and commitment. Some people say, well, I don't want my child to be limited to that kind of lifestyle. So, we want to create a trust, maybe $4 million, maybe $5 million, that will give the child the ability to live independently of government support. And, perhaps that in those cases, that trust might be managed by siblings, or you could have a corporate trustee involved in that. But, those are two ways of looking at it. But the bottom line is, it's very difficult to set aside a significant amount of money, especially, well, I was going to say especially today, but it's always been the case. So it's difficult to set aside that much money if you have, all the other needs of the family going on. Insurance is really the only way to do it. Insurance in that case acts kind of like a letter of credit to the child. And at the death of the parents, the letter of credit pays off. It doesn't have to be returned. The child gets access to a lifestyle that they would not otherwise have, and independence that they wouldn't otherwise have. And at the end of the day, what's left can go back to the family. So, those are all difficult problems. We have one case now where a child has severe cerebral palsy, can't sit up unless he's strapped into a chair.
Yeah.
Simply has no ability to move, feed himself, or whatever. And yet the child has normal intelligence. Child's doing well in his schoolwork. Who knows, what the outcome is for this person if they have the resources to live as normally as possible. I mean, he could become a psychologist. Who knows what holds for him? But it's a tragedy, potentially compounded by what's going to happen when the parents pass away.
Yep.
We've had a number of experiences like that. We have, in some cases, parents don't let go of the child. They want the child. Maybe it's an issue of guilt, or maybe it's just an issue of, overwhelming sympathy. But some children are never let go of, and those children wake up one day and the parent is gone. And sometimes some parents are just in denial about things until there is a life-threatening event, life-threatening diagnosis. So, we do our best to advise people, but you can't make them.
Yep. And you see this all the time, unfortunately.
Frustrating part of our business, because look, you have to realize that none of these things are unique situations. We professionals see them all the time. Insurance people see them all the time. Lawyers see them all. I mean, it's, there are solutions, but in many cases, families simply don't seem to be able to do what should be done early enough.
And this is where hopefully, if they hear it and they see it in an environment like this, they can realize like, yeah, maybe I really do need to think about it. One of the things that I want to talk to you about, and hopefully we could talk about this in another session, is I know that you do the Medicare. I know that I got involved in Medicaid. I've often said that after we ran out of, mom had Alzheimer's for 16 years and needed full-time care. And we eventually ran out of her money, and then ran out of a bunch of our money, trying to support her. And there's lots of things that we should have known about Medicare and Medicaid, spent a lot of time doing that. So maybe we can do another session on that. I want to thank you, Larry, for taking the time out of your day for this. Is there anything else that you want to add before we end our session?
To people who listen to this, that these problems, again, I guess I repeat myself, but these problems aren't unique. There are ways of dealing with them. People have been dealing with them, for a long, ever since there's been civilization. And really, in one way or another, the best way to get a handle on it is just not to delay, to, commit. If you have one of those issues, commit early to the resolution of it.
Yep. And I think my takeaway from this is don't be afraid in family situations to talk, ask the families, talk about what you want to have happen on both ends, children who are family caregivers and who will become family caregivers. Ask your parents, where is the material? Do you have the material? May I have a copy of the material? And if not, let's get this thing done. What do you want to do with what you have and how you want to live, as you age and maybe not be able to make decisions for yourself. For the caregivers, for the children of the aging, think about starting earlier. Think about having this, some of the insurance products. Talk with somebody that you trust about the kinds of things that are available. Start early, make sure that you do, and maybe aging won't be as big as a problem as you think it will be because you've prepared. Remember to join WeCare4 and also come to our social channels. I hope that you will discuss some of the things that you hear on our podcast, and I appreciate your time. Larry, thank you so much for taking the time, and hopefully we'll be able to connect again and talk about Medicare and all the different, maybe a little seminar on Medicare for people who are beginning that and how perhaps you can help them. Thank you again, Larry. Take care.